I showed up at my daughter's house, thinking it was just a family dinner. The moment I sat down, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you cared about us, you'd sign your house over tonight." The words cut deeper than any slap. That house was the one I built with my own hands, brick by brick, alongside my late wife. I kept quiet, but what she didn't know was that I'd hidden the original deed and letters in a safe she could never touch. When she pushed me out her front door and shouted, "Get out of my house," I walked away with nothing but a sting on my face, and a secret that would change everything. Do you want to know what happened when the truth finally came out at our next family dinner? Follow my story until the end, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. The evening air bit cold against the skin as the front door creaked open. Lorraine stood there, her face tight with a smile that carried no warmth. "You're late, Dad," she said, though I had arrived exactly on time. The sharpness in her tone hit harder than the wind at my back. Marvin, her husband, hovered behind her with that same detached look he always wore when I was around. Like I was a chore he couldn't quite escape. Stepping inside, the house felt tidy. Too tidy, as though it had been prepared for something other than a family dinner. The smell of roast turkey filled the room, but it didn't invite comfort. Instead, it made the silence heavier. Lorraine handed me my coat back almost as soon as she had taken it, tossing it onto the rack with little care. Her children darted past me without a word, too preoccupied with their devices to glance up. There was no embrace, no warmth. It was a strange welcome, and a whisper inside warned this evening might not be what it seemed. At the table, I took my seat near the end, the place usually reserved for me as the eldest. My chair scraped louder than expected, drawing Lorraine's quick glare. She steered the conversation away from me almost instantly, each time I offered a thought about the weather, the news, even the football game on Sunday. She brushed it aside, rushing to tell a story about her financial troubles and how nobody understands the stress of keeping up a household these days. Marvin nodded along, his fork tapping impatiently. Vera, my sister-in-law, offered a gentle laugh to ease the mood. "Well, at least we're all together tonight," she said kindly, her eyes meeting mine with a softness I craved. But Lorraine silenced her with a quick, clipped, "We'll get through it," before moving the talk back to herself. Then came Silas. He leaned back, balancing his glass in his hand, and said with an edge of casual cruelty, "Must be nice still having that old place of yours. Delmar. Big house for one man." The remark stung more than I let show. I caught Vera shift uncomfortably, but no one else spoke. The air thinned, and I felt the weight of eyes on me. Forks clinked against plates as Lorraine leaned forward. "You should really think about the future, Dad," she said with a smile that wasn't a smile. "What's going to happen with the house? You know you can't take care of it forever." Harlan, ever the strategist, chimed in smoothly. "It would give everyone stability, especially Lorraine and the kids." Their words pressed in from every side. The warmth of the dinner turned to ice. I could hear the undertone. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a move on the board, and I was the piece being cornered. My eyes drifted to the window where the last light of day was fading, and memory crept in uninvited. I could still see my late wife, hands dusted with flour, standing in the kitchen of that very house we built together, brick by brick. Her laughter had filled those walls, echoing through years of birthdays, holidays, and quiet mornings. That house wasn't just wood and nails, it was us. To give it up would be to let her memory be taken too. The more they pressed, the more certain it became. This dinner wasn't about family, it was a setup. My chest tightened as the realization hardened into truth. Then Lorraine's voice broke through, louder than before. "If you really cared about family, you'd sign the papers tonight." The room went silent, all eyes on me. My hand tightened on the fork until the metal cut into my palm. Papers, tonight. And that's when I saw it. An envelope resting on the counter. My name scrawled across the front. My heart jumped. It was clearly part of this ambush, though I wasn't meant to see it. As I moved to stand, Lorraine was quicker. She swept the envelope into her hands and tucked it away with a glare that told me not to ask. The chair beneath me felt smaller, weaker. I pushed it back and rose, shaken. The demand, the envelope, the silence, it all tangled together into a knot I couldn't untie. My daughter's words, "Sign the papers tonight," echoed louder than the clatter of dishes. Stepping outside for air, the chill of the autumn night cut deep. But it wasn't the wind that burned. It was betrayal, sharper than any blade. What had they hidden in that envelope? And why was I not meant to see it? The night air bit at my cheeks as I stood on Lorraine's porch, staring at the door that had just closed in my face. My breath rose in uneven clouds, each one carrying the sting of what had just happened. That envelope, the one with my name on it, burned in my mind. I knew, deep down, it wasn't a simple letter. It had to be about the house, the one I built with my own hands, the one that held every memory of my late wife. And yet, before I could even touch it, Lorraine snatched it away like I wasn't even entitled to see what bore my own name. She came back into the dining room a moment later, plastering on that thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. No one said a word about the envelope. Marvin leaned back in his chair, pretending to sip his drink, while Silas shifted his eyes away. I sat there, the taste of betrayal rising bitter in my throat. Lorraine's voice cut through the silence. "Dad, you need to stop being stubborn. You can't keep clinging to that old place forever." I swallowed hard. That old place is my home. Lorraine, your mother and I built every inch of it. It's not just walls and floors. Marvin set his glass down a little too hard, the sound sharp against the wood. "Come on, Delmar. Think about what's best for everyone. Lorraine and the kids could use the stability. Isn't it time you do the right thing?" The words struck deeper than he probably intended. And the right thing? I had spent my whole life doing the right thing, working late nights, fixing what broke, carrying the weight when others couldn't. Yet here I was, being told I was selfish. Lorraine snapped before I could answer. "You always make it about you, about your memories, your pride. What about us? Don't we matter?" Her voice rose, sharp and cutting, filling the room with tension. Vera tried to interject, her voice soft but firm. "Lorraine, maybe this isn't the way to... Stay out of it." "Aunt Vera," Lorraine barked, silencing her with a glare. The air thickened with hostility, and I could feel my chest tightening, like the walls themselves were pressing in. The breaking point came swift and brutal. Lorraine stepped closer, her eyes burning with something I didn't recognize anymore. And then, before I could even flinch, her hand struck across my face. The crack echoed louder than the clinking dishes on the table. For a moment, the world froze. Casey Lynn gasped, her young voice trembling in the silence. Marvin stared down at his lap. Silas leaned back, arms crossed, refusing to meet my eyes. No one moved. No one spoke. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, had raised her hand against me. The sting on my cheek was nothing compared to the wound in my chest. She didn't stop there. Lorraine's hands pressed hard against my shoulders as she shoved me back, her voice a roar. "Get out of my house." I stumbled toward the door, unsteady, my body frail against her fury. The shove wasn't just physical, it was every rejection, every unspoken resentment, crashing down at once. Vera's voice, barely a whisper, carried behind me. "Lorraine, please." But no one listened, not even Marvin, who sat like a stone, pretending he wasn't part of this. The door opened wide, and before I could regain my footing, Lorraine pushed harder. My feet hit the porch. The door slammed shut, and I heard the lock click into place. I sank onto the porch steps, my legs too weak to hold me. My cheek throbbed where her hand had landed, but the pain inside my chest ached far worse. Through the wooden frame of the house, muffled laughter and clinking glasses floated out, as though the blow I'd just taken never happened. The cold wrapped around me, yet I barely felt it. My thoughts ran wild, chasing every sacrifice I had made for Lorraine, nights spent working overtime to pay her tuition, weekends fixing her first car, the house she ran through as a child. Now it all felt twisted, weaponized against me. This wasn't a family dinner. It was an ambush, carefully planned, with me as the target. I stood slowly, clutching the railing for balance. Her words echoed louder than the night crickets. "Get out of my house." And I did. I walked into the darkness, but my mind was shackled in the past. Memories of love and sacrifice now turned into chains. The autumn wind carried them with me, sharp and relentless, reminding me that blood can wound deeper than any stranger's hand. The night air cut through the thin jacket wrapped around my shoulders. Each step down Lorraine's walkway felt heavier than the last, as though the sting on my cheek had crawled inside and taken root somewhere deeper. Streetlights flickered along the empty road, their pale glow reflecting off damp asphalt. Pride burned hot, but disbelief froze the rest of me. A father shouldn't have to walk away from his child's door like an unwanted stranger. The cold pressed in, but memory had its own way of heating the skin. I could still feel the force of her hand, but worse than that was the sound of her voice. Sharp, dismissive, final. Words like those didn't vanish into the night. They echoed. With each breath, the past pushed forward. I remembered when hands weren't used to strike but to build. Long before Lorraine grew tall enough to look me in the eye, those same hands had laid brick upon brick to raise the house that became our home. Back then, I worked double shifts at the shop, trading rest for lumber, overtime pay for bags of cement. My wife would bring coffee to the worksite and laugh at the uneven lines until we fixed them together. Every nail driven was a promise. This family would never go without shelter. That promise came at a cost. Vacations were skipped, new clothes were patched and worn again, and dinners sometimes stretched a single roast into 3 nights. But the roof stood solid, the floors held warmth, and the children, especially Lorraine, had a place to grow. I used to watch her race through the halls, hair wild, laughter bouncing off the walls I had plastered with tired but steady hands. Those walls once echoed joy. Now they seemed to echo only accusation. Somewhere between then and tonight, something had broken. I kept asking myself, when did her eyes shift from gratitude to calculation? When did the child who once ran to me with scraped knees become the woman who pushed me out into the cold? It wasn't just her hand that hurt. It was the knowledge that the bond between us had snapped, leaving splinters too deep to pull free. The walk home stretched longer than usual. My small house stood waiting. Lights off, its quiet pressing against me. Unlocking the door, I stepped into silence that felt too sharp, too deliberate. No laughter, no questions about my day, no voice humming in the kitchen, just the steady tick of the clock on the wall. I hung up my jacket and turned toward the hallway, my eyes catching on framed photographs that hadn't moved in years. One in particular, Lorraine at age 10, grinning with missing front teeth, seemed to mock the man I had become. That smile belonged to a daughter I no longer recognized. I lowered myself into the chair by the desk. My cheeks still carried the warmth of her slap, but my thoughts turned back to that envelope, the one with my name written clear across it, the one she yanked away before I could touch it. My gut told me it held more than paper. It carried intention, maybe a deed, maybe legal language twisted into something I'd never willingly agree to. Maybe proof that what happened tonight wasn't born of sudden anger, but of careful planning. The lamp on my desk hummed faintly as I stared at a blank page in front of me. The urge to write, to record what I saw and felt, came strong. If they were building a case against me, I needed my own record. A father's word might not carry weight in that room tonight, but on paper, maybe it would. My chest tightened with dread, yet resolve settled alongside it. Tonight wasn't just about humiliation, it was a warning. If they had already started putting things in motion behind my back, I couldn't afford to sit still. A whisper slipped from my lips before I even realized I was speaking. If they've already started taking what's mine, I need to be ready. The clock ticked on, steady and merciless, as though counting down to a battle I hadn't chosen but couldn't avoid. The morning light pushed through the thin curtains. Though it felt dimmer than it should have been, sleep had not come easily. Every time the body tried to rest, the The sting of a daughter's hand across the face returned, sharper in memory than it had been in the moment. The echo of her words, "Get out of my house," clung to the walls of this modest home as though they had been carved into the plaster. The coffee pot hissed in the kitchen, and its smell carried through the still air. Fingers tapped against the table. There was no escaping the truth. Silence had already done enough damage. Action had to come now, before everything slipped completely away. The phone sat heavy in the palm. For years it had been the lifeline of work, family, and friendship. Now, it felt like the last rope dangling over a cliff. The number was still memorized, though dialing it brought a shake to the hand. With every ring, memories pressed forward, her laughter as a child when training wheels came off, the proud smile when she first left for school. Those sounds clashed against the venom of last night. The line clicked alive. "What do you want?" Her voice was flat, sharp, like glass. A breath was drawn, steadied. Then the words came. "We need to talk about last night." "You mean about how you embarrassed me in my own home?" She snapped back. "You don't belong in the middle of my life anymore. That house, you don't even use it. Why hold on to it?" The muscles in the chest tightened. "That house was built with my hands, every brick, every board. Your mother's laughter is in those walls. Don't you dare erase me from it." There was a pause, the sound of shifting, and then another voice, faint, just behind hers, a man's tone, low but clear enough. "Marvin." The realization struck like ice water down the spine. He was there, feeding lines, guiding her. Lorraine's voice hardened further. "You need to let go. Stop clinging to the past, or you'll regret it." The words burned. "Regret? After everything given up for you, you think regret hasn't already carved enough scars?" The voice cracked, not with weakness, but with the weight of years carried alone. The line went silent. Then a quick breath, followed by a slam. The call cut dead. The kitchen felt smaller now, the ticking of the clock louder, the weight of betrayal thicker. She wasn't alone in this. The bitterness hadn't grown only from her heart. Someone else had planted it, watered it, and now it was spreading like rot. The whisper slipped out before the room swallowed it. She wasn't alone in this. Someone's feeding her venom. The thought clung like a storm cloud, warning that the battle ahead would not be against a daughter's anger alone, but against a tide carefully stirred by another hand. 2 days passed before the phone rang again. Vera's voice came through gently, telling me that Lorraine wanted me to come back for dinner. She said my daughter was trying to make peace, that she had sounded calmer, even apologetic. Part of me wanted to believe it. Another part, the deeper part that had learned from a lifetime of hard lessons, knew that sudden sweetness often carried something bitter behind it. Still, Vera's encouragement weighed on me. "Maybe she's realizing she went too far," she said softly. Hope and suspicion tugged at each other inside my chest. After pacing the small living room, staring at the family pictures that lined my wall, I agreed to go. When I pulled up to Lorraine's house that evening, the same porch light burned over the door, the one I had stood under when she shoved me out. My hands trembled slightly on the railing as I walked in. Marvin greeted me with a tight nod, his smile stiff, unconvincing. The dining room was set neatly, a little too neatly, as if rehearsed for a show. Lorraine came out of the kitchen, her voice unusually sweet, her steps measured. "Dad, thank you for coming. Let's have a good dinner tonight." Something in her tone rang false, like an actor reading from a script, and then my eyes caught on the stranger at the end of the table. A quiet man with a leather case by his side, sitting upright, watching everything but saying nothing. The air in the room shifted immediately. Dinner began with small talk, hollow and strained. Lorraine smiled too often, her words dripping with politeness. Then, halfway through the meal, she folded her hands on the table, cleared her throat, and said she wanted to apologize. "I was harsh the other night," she said, "but I want us to be united, for the family's sake. That's why I asked you here." The apology felt like paper-thin wrapping around a heavy stone. Her hand reached down, pulling a stack of papers from her lap. She slid them across the table, right in front of me. It's just a small agreement, Dad. Something to make things simpler for the future. The words sent a chill down my spine. I looked down and saw the legal formatting, the lines for signatures. My breath tightened. I didn't even have to read further to know. It was about the house. Before I could respond, Vera's voice cut through the silence. Firm, clear, unshaken. Lorraine, enough! Every head turned. Vera leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Don't you dare call this an apology. This is manipulation, and we both know it. Lorraine's face darkened. The mask slipped, her jaw tightening, eyes flashing. Stay out of this, Aunt Vera, she snapped. This is between me and my father. But Vera didn't flinch. No, this is between decency and greed. A wave of relief washed over me. For the first time in days, someone stood openly at my side. Someone who wasn't afraid to say aloud what I had been choking back. The notary, at the end of the table, shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us, clearly regretting he had accepted this assignment. I pushed the pen across the table, refusing to pick it up. This isn't happening tonight, I said, my voice steady, though my heart thundered in my chest. And it won't happen tomorrow, or ever. Not this way. Lorraine's voice cracked, anger breaking through her act. Do you want to ruin everything for us? Don't you care about family? The word family stung harder than her slap had. I leaned back, folding my arms. Family doesn't ambush each other. Family doesn't demand signatures at the dinner table. Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then Lorraine leaned in, her voice low but venomous. You'll regret this, Dad. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. My eyes flicked to Vera, who gave me a small nod of support. Without another word, I walked to the door, leaving the papers behind. The night air outside felt raw against my skin, but it was honest, better than the false warmth inside. As I drove home, Lorraine's words echoed in my mind. She thought regret would come from refusing to sign, but the only regret I carried was believing for even a moment that her dinner invitation was about love. The safe sat in the corner of my bedroom closet, a relic from another time. The old steel box had carried decades of secrets, worn papers, receipts, and the things my late wife once called anchors of family. My fingers trembled as I turned the dial, listening for that familiar click. When it opened, the smell of paper and dust carried me back 30 years. Inside lay an envelope no one else in the family knew about. I pulled it free, heart beating heavier than the quiet of the house. The envelope wasn't large, but its weight seemed to crush the air. Within it were the original copies of the deed, letters written in my wife's delicate script, and a folder of financial records I'd guarded like a soldier protecting the last flag of his country. These weren't just documents. They were proof of a life built from calloused hands and endless nights of sacrifice. I spread the papers across my desk, the lamp's glow washing over them. A new layer of betrayal revealed itself. Tucked between the older deeds and tax papers were bank statements I hadn't looked at closely in months. My name was still on the accounts, but the withdrawals were wrong. Strange amounts tied to Marvin Riker's name. Marvin, with his stiff handshake and cold smile, had been siphoning money under the guise of joint family accounts. The pit in my stomach deepened. Lorraine's sharp words, her pressure at the dinner table, suddenly had a shadow behind them. Anger mixed with grief as I pressed the papers flat. My own daughter's husband had been nudging her toward this treachery. They weren't just trying to take the house. They'd already been reaching into the foundation of everything I owned. My chest ached with the realization, but behind the ache came clarity. If they wanted war, I had to be ready. I reached for the phone and dialed an old number. Silas Boone picked up on the second ring, his voice gruff but steady. Delmar. Been a long time. Silas, I said, swallowing the bitterness in my throat. I need help. Legal help. You still dabble in paralegal work? He paused, sensing the weight behind my tone. I do. What's happened? I laid out the facts. The dinner, the envelope Lorraine tried to hide, Marvin's hand in the finances. Silas listened without interruption, then cleared his throat. Document everything, every letter, every withdrawal, Every threat. Don't let a single detail slip through. We'll build this case from the ground up. Relief didn't come, but determination did. For the first time since that cursed dinner, I felt less alone. Silas was a man who'd seen courts chew people apart. His advice carried the sharpness of experience. Hours slipped by as I sorted through papers, each document like a knife cutting deeper into the image of Lorraine as my little girl. There it was, undeniable, her forged signature on a form attempting to transfer property rights. The handwriting wasn't perfect, but it was hers. My breath caught, my hand gripping the page so tight it nearly tore. Memories of her as a child flooded me, her laughter echoing in the yard, the way she once ran into my arms after skinning her knee. How could those same hands now forge my future away? The heartbreak pressed down like a storm, but within it a new steel was forged. If my daughter had chosen this path, then I had to meet her there, not as a broken father, but as a man defending his dignity and the legacy of the woman who once shared my bed. One by one, I slipped the documents into a secure folder. Letters from my wife went on top, her words a shield I could carry into the fight. For the family, she had written in one, decades ago. Tonight, those words became my armor. The clock ticked past midnight, the house still and silent around me. In the glow of the lamp, I whispered into the room as if she were still beside me. You may have taken her love, Lorraine, but you won't take what we built together. Resolve settled into my bones. The man they thought was weak had just found his strength. Silas Boone's office still smelled like paper and old coffee when the front bell jingled. The morning light came in thin and slanted, striping the carpet with pale gold. Silas looked up from his desk and waved me in without a fuss. No flattery, no pity, just space to sit and breathe. That helped more than he knew. The folder felt heavier than wood in my hands. He listened while the whole mess spilled out. The dinner, the slap, the push, the staged apology, the notary. The papers slid across the table like bait. When the words ran dry, I set the documents on his blotter and leaned back, palms open, letting him read the evidence that had kept me up all night. Silas took his time. He wore readers that clipped on and off like a habit. First the bank statements, each with that same odd withdrawal pattern and a path that curved toward Marvin Riker. Then the photocopies of the deed, the letters my late wife had written, steady cursive, steadier heart, and at last the transfer form with a signature that looked like Lorraine's, except for the way the tails of the letters lied. Silas angled the paper to the light and hummed low. "This isn't your daughter's hand," he said, tapping the page. "It's someone trying to be your daughter's hand." He set the sheet down carefully. "But it's dangerous. Dell, if they file it and you don't catch it fast, you'll spend months untangling what should never have been touched." A part of me wanted to storm out and fix it by sheer force of fatherhood, as if love were still the kind of hammer that could put a crooked nail straight. Another part of me knew better. Time and evidence. That's what Silas offered. Not rescue, not revenge, just a plan that might hold in court. "We start quiet," he said. "Keep your temper. Keep your distance. We document each contact and every attempt to pressure you. We get affidavits. We pull credit reports. We trace who paid that notary and whether the visit shows up on anyone's calendar. And Dell, don't go to the house alone. Not until we're ready." He slid a legal pad across the desk. "Write out the timeline from memory. Exact dates if you have them. If not, anchors, holidays, game days, anything that pins the memory to something fixed." The pen sat between my fingers like a relic from the old shop. Years ago, I could run a chalk line straight through a room and hit the studs dead center. This felt similar, a line of truth snapped taut in the dust. The words came easier than expected. Thanksgiving planning, Vera's phone call, the first dinner, the envelope on the counter, the staged apology, the notary. The pen shoved back across the table. Each line laid down another plank of the bridge I needed to cross. Silas skimmed what I'd written, then looked up. "I know you want to protect her from herself," he said gently. "But right now she's listening to someone else's voice. Marvin benefits if your name disappears from anything with value. He'll keep turning the dial until the station in her head is all him. Can I warn her? The question came out before I could stop it. You can, he said. But not like last time. No accusations, no shouting, and never without a witness. If you must speak, speak to the facts and walk away. The clock over his shoulder clicked once. I pocketed the pad copy he made for me and stood to leave. He gripped my hand with both of his. You're not alone in this, he said. That sentence held me together until the sidewalk, where winter air stung enough to remind a man he's alive. By noon I was on Lorraine's street again, moving slower than Pride would have liked. The maple out front had dropped the last of its leaves, and the lawn looked like it had been raked by someone in a hurry. The porch light was on, though the sun sat high. I knocked twice. Lorraine opened the door just wide enough to frame her face. You shouldn't be here, she said. I won't stay, I answered. I came to say one thing. Check the numbers. Check who's advising you. If you can't trust me, trust mathematics. It doesn't bleed. She laughed without humor. You've always had a pretty way of saying no. You made my childhood about the house, about your workbench, about your rules. This is my home now, my family. We'll decide what's stable. The words floated between us like frost. I kept Silas's counsel in mind and looked at the floorboards rather than the bruise her sentence tried to leave. Stability doesn't come from stealing, I said softly. If there's nothing wrong, then transparency won't hurt. Her eyes narrowed. Transparency is you signing what should have been signed years ago. Something shifted behind her shoulder, a shadow unpeeling from the hallway. Marvin appeared with a mug, houndstooth robe tied loose, eyes shining from too much certainty. Del Mar, he said in a neighborly tone a man uses when he wants the neighborhood to hear. We were just talking about you. I told Lorraine we'd make it right. No bad blood. But you have to stop showing up like this. I came once, I said. He turned to Lorraine as if I weren't there. He raised his voice. It scared you. It scared the kids. The lie slid out like a polished coin. We can't have him popping in without warning. I didn't raise my voice, I said. But he was already moving into the next line, like a man reading from a script he'd rehearsed in the mirror. You told her she'd be sorry. He continued mildly. That's a threat by any measure, Lorraine. Sweetheart, we need healthy boundaries. Boundaries. Funny word for a man with his hands in other people's pockets. Lorraine squared her shoulders, drawing strength from his stance. Yes, she said, eyes on me. Boundaries. Don't come back here. Not without being invited. There's a kind of silence that isn't empty so much as crowded. I've found it there on the porch, squeezed between all the things I could say and the one thing I should. I hear you, came out. A breath later. Keep your paperwork clean, please. The door clicked shut. A curtain feathered aside, then fell. On the sidewalk. Mrs. Koenig, the neighbor with the careful garden, was bending to pick up her mail. She straightened and glanced over sympathetically, then stepped closer until our shadows touched. Mr. Knox? She said quietly. I shouldn't get involved, but I heard things through the thin wall when they moved in, and I heard him just now. Be careful. Yesterday I saw an officer's car out front. He wasn't here long. Marvin was talking about going to the courthouse if you kept making scenes. The ground tilted a degree. A restraining order? The phrase scratched like dry bark. She nodded. I don't know for sure, but he said something about paperwork to keep the old man at bay. You've always been kind. I thought you should know. Kindness kept my shoulders from slumping. Thank you, I said. She squeezed my forearm, the way people do when words run out, and went back to her letters. The walk back to the truck felt longer than the block allowed. Restraining order. If they filed one, it would paint me as a danger to my own blood. It would twist the next knock into a violation, the next word into defiance. It would take a story already bent with grief and curve it into a question mark over my name. Home steadied things. The kitchen clock ticked. The furnace coughed to life. Light pooled on the table where the folder waited. I wrote down the afternoon exactly as it happened. The time of the knock. The dialogue as close as memory could make it. Mrs. Koenig's warning. The taste of metal fear that sat under the tongue like a penny. I faxed the notes to Silas, then called to make sure paper arrived as paper. His voice stayed level. "They're tightening the net," he said. "It means we're getting close. Do not contact them again. If anyone calls you, let it go to voicemail. Save everything." "Even the silence?" Humor tried and failed. Especially the silence. Evening sank and the house gathered itself. I made a sandwich I couldn't finish, and washed a plate that didn't need washing. At some point, the ring of the slap faded into the rustle of the maple outside, and the line from last night, "You may have taken her love, but not what we built," came back with a small correction. Love doesn't get taken, it gets buried, or it hides, or it sleeps until someone speaks gently enough to wake it. Maybe that wouldn't be me. Maybe it would be truth itself, blunt and patient. The phone lit up once. Unknown number. It stopped before the second ring. A minute later, a text arrived from a string I didn't recognize. "Family meeting tomorrow at 6. Be on time." No name, no address, just that directive tone people use when they think they've already won. My hands went still on the table. A meeting called by people who had locked a door in my face. A meeting where the notary might return, or an officer, or both. A meeting dressed as reconciliation, but built like a trap. Silas would tell me not to go without counsel. So I placed the phone face down, pulled a fresh yellow sheet, and began drafting questions worth taking into any room. The evening light dimmed over Lorraine's house as I made my way up the steps. The invitation had been dressed in honeyed words. A family meeting to clear the air. But every step closer made the pit in my stomach heavier. Inside, the living room had been arranged almost like a courtroom. Chairs pulled tight, faces lined up, all eyes waiting for me. Marvin's shadow loomed even in his silence. I could feel his grip in the stiffness of each greeting. Lorraine stood at the center, her posture rigid, voice too steady to be natural. "Dad," she began, "this is about safety." Her words slid like ice through the room. Marvin sat behind her, nodding, his expression smug. "You've been threatening me," she continued, her tone rising, "and I can't live like this anymore." The words hit harder than any slap. A murmur ran through the family. Some faces turned away, uncomfortable. Others leaned in, whispering. A niece's eyes filled with doubt, while another cousin folded her arms, siding with Lorraine. My chest burned, but I forced my voice steady. "That is a lie. You know it, Lorraine, and you know who put it in your mouth." Gasps answered me, but I didn't flinch. From inside my jacket, I unfolded the documents Silas had helped me collect. I laid them on the coffee table, pages of financial trails, signatures, and a copy of the forged deed. "This," I said firmly, "is the truth you've been hiding from. Marvin has been draining accounts, pulling you into a scheme that will leave you with nothing. Look at the numbers. Look at the ink." Lorraine's eyes darted to the pages, but Marvin was quicker. He leaned forward, his voice sharp. "He's twisting it all. He's paranoid, bitter, and he can't stand that his time is done." His hand nearly slapped the papers from the table. For a moment, I thought she believed him again, the way her jaw tightened, the way she refused to meet my eyes. Then the front door creaked open. Eldon Cray, my neighbor of 40 years, stepped inside, hat in his hands. His voice was rough, but steady. "I didn't plan to walk in on this circus, but I won't keep quiet. I saw Marvin pressuring Lorraine weeks ago, handing her papers, telling her to just sign, not to worry. She didn't even read them." The room split in two. A gasp here, a mutter there. One of the cousins shot Marvin a dark look. Vera, sitting off to the side, whispered, "I knew it." Marvin's face drained of color, then flushed red. His act cracked. "You think this proves anything?" he snapped, his voice rising to a near roar. "You're all fools if you believe him. That old man will ruin this family." Lorraine flinched, her mask faltering. For the first time in months, she looked at me, not with contempt, but with something softer, something uncertain. My heart twisted. caught between hurt and the faintest thread of hope. Marvin's fury filled the room. He surged to his feet, pacing like a caged animal. His words spat venom, curses nearly breaking free. "This isn't over, Delmar. You'll regret crossing me." His fists clenched, and for a second, I thought he might strike me right there. But instead, he shoved past the others and stormed out, the front door slamming behind him with a thunder that left silence hanging like smoke. The quiet was heavier than his threats. Faces around me shifted, unsettled, some ashamed. Lorraine stood frozen. Her lips parted, but no words came out. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of it all, the truth clawing its way out no matter how deep he tried to bury it. I let the silence linger before I spoke. "You can believe him, or you can believe what you've seen with your own eyes. But remember, lies always rot from the inside. Truth survives." Marvin's echo still rattled in the air, his promise of vengeance. And deep down, we all knew this family would never be the same again. The silence that followed Marvin's departure was heavier than the slam of the door itself. His words still echoed in the room, sharp and poisonous. Yet it was the quiet afterward that cut the deepest. No one wanted to look at me. Lorraine sat rigid, her eyes fixed on the floor, hands trembling in her lap. Casey Lynn stood near the wall, her arms crossed as though shielding herself from a blow that had not yet come. The air felt brittle, as if one more word might shatter what little remained of our family's fragile bond. A bitter irony settled in, after all the years of working, sacrificing, building a home for them. My own blood now regarded me with suspicion. The sting from Lorraine's earlier accusations lingered, sharper than any physical wound. I shifted in my chair, waiting for someone, anyone, to speak. But silence was its own verdict, and it pressed down harder than condemnation. Finally, Lorraine's shoulders quaked, and she lifted her tear-streaked face. Her lips trembled, words caught somewhere between pride and despair. "Dad," she whispered, the voice of my little girl breaking through for the first time in months. I didn't mean for it to go this far. The room seemed to lean toward her. My chest tightened as she confessed, haltingly, that Marvin had been pressuring her for months. He had dangled promises of financial security, of stability, of control, always couched in words that sounded like protection. She admitted she had gone along, not out of malice, but out of fear of being left adrift if she resisted him. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, voice cracking. "I just thought maybe it was easier if I didn't fight him." Her words cut deeper than the slap she once gave me. Betrayal I could endure, but the sight of my daughter crumbling under another man's shadow brought a grief no father should bear. I wanted to rage, to tell her how deeply she'd wounded me, but what came instead was silence. A silence filled with sorrow, and the faint flicker of compassion. The others stirred, uneasy. Vera Lansing's voice rose above the murmur, firm and unwavering. "This has gone too far," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "Delmar has every right to be angry, and you all know Marvin's hand has been steering this storm." But the family wasn't united. Some whispered doubts, questioning Eldon Cray's testimony. Others painted Marvin as misunderstood, a man simply trying to protect what he believed was his. The fracture widened before my eyes, splintering kin into camps. It wasn't just me against Marvin anymore. It was a family breaking apart under the weight of lies and loyalties. The front door rattled, then burst open with a violence that froze every breath in the room. Marvin had returned, his face red, eyes wild with fury. He stormed in like a man who couldn't bear to lose control. "This is my house," he bellowed, shoving a chair aside so hard it skidded across the hardwood and crashed against the wall. The sound made Casey Lynn flinch and Vera mutter a prayer under her breath. Lorraine leapt up, pleading, "Marvin, please stop! You're making it worse!" But he was past reason. His rage burned too brightly. His fists clenched, and for a moment I saw not just an angry man, but a cornered one. The kind who would strike not because of strength, but because fear had made him desperate. He moved closer to Lorraine, raising his hand in a gesture that made my blood run cold. Something inside me snapped. Without thought, I stepped forward, planting myself between them. The room seemed to tilt, all eyes fixed on the space between my old frame and his quivering anger. My voice rose, louder than it had in years, carrying the weight of a father's love and decades of sacrifice. "You will not harm my daughter, not while I'm still standing." For the first time, Marvin faltered. My words rang out with such finality that even Lorraine stared at me, wide-eyed, as though seeing her father not as a frail old man, but as the protector he had always been. The family froze, caught between fear and awe. Marvin's face twisted, but instead of striking, he spat a curse and stormed out again, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The sound of his retreat was followed by another noise, sirens wailing in the distance. A neighbor, hearing the shouting, had called the police. Red and blue lights flickered through the curtains, casting ghostly shadows across the stunned faces around me. As the beams washed over the room, a heavy truth settled in my chest. This was no longer just a family quarrel. It was a fight for justice, for safety, and perhaps my last chance to protect what little remained of us. The flash of red and blue washed across the living room walls, painting every uneasy face in fractured light. The voices inside Lorraine's home went quiet as two officers stepped through the door. Their uniforms brought with them an authority that cut through the tension, though it did little to ease the knot in my chest. Marvin was the first to speak. His tone oozed with practiced indignation. "Officers, thank God you're here. This man has been harassing us all night, stirring up trouble in my home." He pointed at me with a trembling hand, his voice rising. "He won't stop until he tears this family apart." The officers exchanged a glance, calm but alert. One of them asked everyone to sit down. My legs felt heavy as I lowered myself into the chair, every movement slow, deliberate. Lorraine stood in the corner, arms wrapped around herself, eyes darting anywhere but mine. The older officer began his questions, asking what had brought them here. Lorraine stumbled through her words, her voice uneven. She tried to piece together a story that defended Marvin without completely condemning me, but her hesitation spoke louder than her words. I could see her guilt rising like steam, clouding her judgment. Vera's voice cut through the fog. "This man," she said firmly, pointing at me, "is a father and a grandfather. He's been nothing but decent. The only violence tonight came from Marvin." Her words steadied me. For the first time all evening, I felt like I wasn't standing entirely alone. The officers began separating us, one pulling Marvin aside, another leaning closer to me. I answered each question with the truth, letting the details fall plainly. There was no need for embellishment. The facts spoke for themselves. From across the room, Marvin's mask slipped. His voice rose as he argued with the younger officer, his tone harsh, his temper unraveling. "You don't understand. He thinks he still controls everything." His outburst echoed through the room. Lorraine flinched. Casey covered her mouth with trembling hands. For the first time, Marvin's carefully crafted image of control cracked in front of everyone. His rage was laid bare, and with it, the truth I had been carrying alone. Inside, I felt a grim vindication. Though it was hollow, this was not the way I wanted my daughter to learn the truth. Watching her shoulders shake as she turned away from Marvin's anger was like watching glass shatter. Once broken, it could never be whole again. When the storm of shouting died, Lorraine collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Between sobs, she admitted what I had suspected all along. Marvin had been filling her ears with lies for months. Lies about money, about inheritance, about me. Her voice cracked when she said, "I never wanted to hurt you, Dad. I didn't know who to believe." Casey, trembling, came to my side and whispered, "I believe you now." Her words were fragile, but they held more weight than anything I had heard all night. But not everyone stood with me. Silas Boone, a man I had once considered a friend, shook his head slowly. "Delmar, you're not innocent in this," he said, his voice cutting. "Marvin's rough. But he's not the only problem here. This fight isn't finished. His betrayal cut deep, adding another fracture to the night. The officers finally stood Marvin up, their hands firm on his arms. He struggled, his face twisted with fury. As they led him toward the door, he turned his head back and spat venom with every word. "I'll take everything from you, old man. You can't stop me." Lorraine screamed for him to stop. Casey began to sob, and I sat frozen, the sting of his threat burrowing into my bones. The door closed behind them, but the silence that followed was louder than any shouting. The house felt hollow, emptied of everything but sorrow and regret. Staring into the midnight air, I whispered words only I could hear. The worst is yet to come. The morning light crept through the blinds like an unwelcome guest. My bones ached from the restless night, and every breath felt heavier than the last. The apartment was silent, too silent after the chaos of the night before. I shuffled into the kitchen, set the coffee pot to gurgling, and sat with my hands wrapped around the chipped mug. The warmth soothed my fingers, but not the cold knot twisting in my chest. Marvin's mask had finally slipped in front of everyone, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, the storm was over. But storms don't end with a single clap of thunder. I stared at the table, empty but for a salt shaker and last night's unopened mail. The echoes of Lorraine's tears haunted me. A daughter's voice, torn between guilt and fear, still rang in my ears. For the first time in years, I wondered if there was still love hidden under the anger. That was when I noticed it. An envelope lay on the floor, just inside my door, as if someone had slipped it under while I slept. No return address, just my name scrawled across the front. The handwriting wasn't neat, it shook, like a hand trembling with regret. My heart slowed as I picked it up. The paper thin but heavy in meaning. I tore it open with careful fingers. It was Lorraine's handwriting. I knew every loop and stroke. I'd once taught her to sign her name when she was just a girl with crayons. Her words cut deep. "Dad, I found some papers Marvin hid from me. They prove he was lying about the money, about the house, about everything. I'm sorry for what I said. I'm sorry for what I did. Marvin told me to push you away, that it was the only way to keep peace. I didn't see it then. I see it now. Please don't give up on me. I still love you. I just don't know how to get free of him. Don't let him find out about this letter. Please." I set the paper down, and for a long while, I couldn't breathe. Vindication washed over me. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't just the paranoid old man Marvin painted me to be. The proof was right there, written in my daughter's own hand. But alongside that relief came a sadness so heavy it nearly crushed me. Lorraine still loved me, yes, but she was trapped, tangled in Marvin's web. I read the letter 3 more times, the words blurring. Each sentence was both a confession and a plea, her way of reaching for me through the bars Marvin had built around her. A knock at the door startled me. My heart leapt, but when I opened it, it wasn't Marvin, it was Vera. She stood there with a casserole dish, her eyes soft but searching. "You look like hell, Delmar," she said plainly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. That was her way, always had been. She set the food on the counter, then turned to study my face. "What's wrong now?" I hesitated, then handed her the letter. Her eyes moved quickly over the words, her lips pressing tighter with each line. "This," she whispered, clutching the paper. "This is your shield. Don't let it out of your sight. If Marvin gets wind of it, he'll burn it, twist it, or worse. You hold on to this like your life depends on it, because it just might." Her voice carried both urgency and comfort. For the first time in days, I felt less alone. She touched my arm, grounding me, reminding me that not everyone had abandoned me. As she left, I folded the letter and slid it into an old cigar box I hadn't touched in years, tucking it deep inside the safe beneath my floorboards. My fingers lingered on the steel as I whispered to myself, "This time, I won't let him destroy us." But just as the lock clicked shut, a sound froze me. A knock at the door, sharp, deliberate, unsettling. My hand tightened around the safe key. Was it Marvin? Was it someone sent by him? The letter still pulsed in my pocket, like a live wire of truth and danger. For the first time, I wondered if knowing the truth might cost us all more than we could bear. The knock came again, sharp and steady against my apartment door. My heart clenched, expecting Marvin's shadow to be standing there, but when I opened it, relief washed over me. A man in plain clothes, badge tucked at his belt, introduced himself as Detective Harris. He spoke softly, asking if he could step inside. "Mr. Knox," he began, "we received an anonymous tip about financial fraud tied to your son-in-law. I need to ask, do you have anything that could help us?" My hand trembled slightly as I thought of the envelope Lorraine had slipped under my door. I hesitated, the weight of betrayal and love pressing down on me at once. Finally, I pulled the letter from the drawer. "This is from my daughter," I said quietly. "She's risking everything by giving this to me. Don't let her down." The detective scanned the pages, nodding gravely. "This is strong evidence, sir. We'll need you to cooperate, but with this, we may finally bring him down." For the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope sparked inside me. Not triumph, not victory, just the fragile sense that truth still had a chance to breathe. Later that week, the plan unfolded. Lorraine had called another family dinner, under the guise of making amends. But this time, the police were prepared, and so was I. As I stepped into her living room, Vera Lansing by my side, I felt the tension wrap around the walls. Marvin smirked when he saw me, as though nothing could touch his confidence. Lorraine sat stiffly, her eyes darting between us. Then, as if on cue, Detective Harris entered. "Mr. Riker," he announced, "we need to talk." Marvin's face drained of color, then flushed red with rage. He tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "This is ridiculous! He's the one causing all this trouble." He jabbed a finger at me. Lorraine stood suddenly, her voice shaking but clear. "No, Marvin, it's you. You lied to me, forged papers, told me to push my own father away." Tears streamed down her face. "I let you poison me against him, and I was too blind to see it until now." The room erupted. Marvin lunged with words sharp as knives, shouting about betrayal and loyalty. But his mask slipped completely when he slammed a fist against the table, his fury uncoiled for all to see. The officers moved swiftly, restraining him as he cursed and spat threats. His voice cracked with desperation. "I'll take everything from you, old man." I stood steady, watching him struggle against the cuffs. "Family is built on love. Marvin," I said firmly, each word carved from years of sacrifice. "Not fear." Lorraine collapsed into sobs, and Vera wrapped an arm around her. Casey Lynn clung to me, whispering, "I believe you now, Grandpa." For the first time, I felt the tide shift. As Marvin was led out into the night, silence draped the room like a heavy cloth. Lorraine knelt before me, her tears wetting my hands. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I can't undo what I've done, but I want to make it right." I pulled her close, my voice low but firm. "Trust has to be rebuilt. Lorraine, it doesn't come back with words. It comes back with actions. We'll take it one step at a time." Vera's steady voice cut through the quiet. "Delmar, you're not alone. You still have us." I looked around the room, broken, scarred, but finally honest. The weight I'd carried since that first dinner began to lift. That night, as I sat alone, I thought about everything that had been taken from me, and everything I still had. Betrayal had cut deep, but truth had clawed its way out. I leaned forward, speaking as though to anyone who might listen beyond these walls. If you give everything to your family, never let anyone mistake your sacrifice for weakness. Stand firm. Protect your dignity. Love is precious, but respect must be earned. And once you lose it, no amount of fear or lies can buy it back. Outside, the world was quiet again, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that quiet was mine to keep.